The rain came down in sheets, slicking the sidewalks and drumming against the glass panes of Heritage Café, a trendy spot nestled in the gentrified heart of what used to be the West Endonce Black stronghold, now stripped clean by real estate developers and rebranded with artisanal signage. Inside, warm lighting reflected off exposed brick and polished wood. Shelves lined with curated books on equity and global coffee culture offered a touch of irony that no one acknowledged. At precisely 9:42 a.m., the cafe door creaked open with a gust of damp wind. In stepped Mr. Walter Briggs, 82 years old, his mahogany skin gleaming faintly with rain. He wore a worn navy cardigan buttoned all the way up, slacks creased at the edges, and polished but clearly aged black shoes. His silver cane tapped softly against the tile floor as he approached the counter. Walter paused beneath the hanging Edison bulbs. He didn't rush. His gaze traced the handwritten chalk menu espresso, nitro cold brew, oat milk latte, landed on the young white barista behind the counter. Her name tag read Tori. She wore her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and had one AirPod still wedged in her ear. "Yes?" she asked, not quite looking up. "I'll have a small black coffee, please," Walter said politely, his voice warm but steady, like a man used to being overlooked but never diminished. Tori tapped at the screen, barely glancing at him. "That'll be 4.5. Walter reached into his cardigan pocket, then into the one stitched onto his slacks. His brows furrowed. He checked the inner lining of his coat, patting gently. He frowned, then looked up, a little sheepishly. "2. Must have left my wallet at home. I didn't mean to. I'm not asking for charity. I just needed to sit for a moment, dry off a bit." At that, Tori's face twisted into something sour. She stepped back from the register and raised her voice just enough for others to hear. "This isn't a shelter, sir," she said, loud and flat. "We don't serve unless you can pay. Company policy." Walter's shoulders squared slightly, but he didn't move. "I understand," he said quietly, "but it's storming out." From a table near the front window, a white woman in her 30s leaned in toward her friend, whispering, "They always have an excuse, don't they?" The friend chuckled without shame, sipping her chai. "I'm not asking for a handout," Walter murmured, more to himself now than to her. Tori shrugged. "Then you can wait outside until the rain lets up." Several heads turned, not to help but to watch. A man in a Patagonia vest near the bookshelf smirked. "Guess we're doing social experiments with coffee now." His buddy added, "If you can't afford a 5-drink, maybe you shouldn't be here." Walter stepped back, his gaze lowered, the humiliation heavy in his chest. The warmth of the cafe now felt cold, foreign. A young black trainee, Jalen, stood behind the espresso machine, eyes flicking from Walter to Tori to the crowd. He didn't speak. He just wiped a clean cup and focused on the frothing wand as if it were more important than a man's dignity. Walter turned toward the door. His hand gripped the handle of his cane tightly, but his spine stayed straight. The laughter, the judgment, the stares, they weren't new, just sharper now. More polished, more professional. But beneath the sting, a familiar truth settled in his bones. They hadn't denied a man without a wallet. They had denied a black man without one. And everybody in that cafe knew it. Even those who looked away. Walter didn't make it to the door. Just as he reached for the handle, a voice called out, flat and perfunctory. "You can sit, but not out here." He turned. It was Tori again, one hand on her hip, the other gesturing toward the back of the cafe. Past the restrooms, beyond the potted plants and curated magazine racks, nestled near the trash bins and mop closet, sat a two-top table no one ever chose willingly. Walter glanced toward it, then toward the many empty seats by the windows, the ones facing the street, washed in warm light. "Still," he nodded. "I appreciate it," he said. He made his way to the back, cane tapping softly, each step echoing louder than it should have in the muted room. No one moved to help. No one offered their seat. Eyes tracked him like a passing storm cloud noticed, tolerated, quickly forgotten. From a central table adorned with MacBooks and half-eaten pastries, 3 young white tech workers observed with casual cruelty. Bryce, all expensive flannel and smug confidence, leaned back in his chair, kicking one boot onto the leg of another. Chase, smaller and sharper-tongued, clicked his tongue. Libby, their red-haired colleague, sipped her cold brew through a paper straw, smiling faintly. Kind of bold to wander in with no money, Chase said, not bothering to lower his voice. Right? Bryce added. Betty's got some speech lined up about systemic injustice next. Wait for it. Libby giggled. Maybe he'll file a complaint and get the cafe canceled. Can't win these days. Their laughter wasn't loud, but it carried. Deliberately so. Walter, now seated in the dim corner, heard it all. He placed his silver cane gently against the table, folded his hands, and stared into the grain of the wood. The smell of bleach from the nearby janitor's closet wafted in waves. A used napkin lay crumpled near his foot. The trash bin lid hissed open as a barista dumped leftover grounds, then let it slam shut. He didn't flinch, didn't sigh, just waited. Nearby, Jalen, the biracial trainee, stood by the sink, cleaning cups. He'd seen the whole exchange. His skin flushed with embarrassment, not just for the scene, but for doing nothing about it. His father had taught him to be quiet in white spaces. His mother had taught him to survive them. He looked up once, toward Walter. Their eyes met briefly, Jalen's wide and unsure, Walter's calm, almost forgiving. It was a glance thick with history, neither had spoken aloud. Tori passed by Walter's table with a tray, deliberately not making eye contact. The tray clattered just slightly as she set it down near a younger white couple, enjoying brunch and latte foam art. She smiled at them. Walter adjusted his cardigan, which was still damp at the shoulders. He didn't belong here, but he had every right to be here. And still he sat near the trash. Outside, the rain had slowed, but inside, the cold lingered. From his seat, Walter could see the counter where the coffee was made, the bright lettering above the pastry case that read, Community, Connection, Coffee. Words meant for the marketing brochure, not for men like him. Somewhere near the front, a baby laughed. A young mother bounced her child on her knee. Joy bloomed in patches across the room. But where Walter sat, light didn't quite reach. No one asked if he wanted anything. No one approached. And that in itself said everything. He sat in silence. The same silence that had followed him since the 1960s. Through protests, through service in a war he didn't start, through decades of slow erasure in neighborhoods he once called home. The silence of polite society, the silence that says, you're allowed to exist, just not too close. The cafe door swung open again as the bell chimed faintly above. Leah Morin stepped inside, shaking off her umbrella. Her curls, streaked with a touch of gray, clung to her cheeks as she pulled down the hood of her raincoat. 40 years old, tall, mixed race, and composed, Leah had been recently promoted to shift supervisor, a role she'd earned not through charm, but consistency. She immediately sensed the shift in energy. The laughter from the center table faded as she stepped in. Tori glanced up from behind the counter, her smile tightening as Leah passed. Leah's eyes swept the cafe with practiced efficiency. The usual faces. The usual chatter. But then she saw him. Walter sat alone in the far corner, framed by a mop bucket and the blue glow of an exit sign. His clothes were still damp. His cane rested beside him, angled with care. No mug, no napkin, not even a glass of water. She turned to Tori. Who is that gentleman? Leah asked. Tori didn't bother looking up from the iPad. Some guy who couldn't pay, said he forgot his wallet. I let him sit back there. You let him sit by the bins? Tori shrugged. He didn't buy anything. Leah stared at her, quiet fury rising. Did you ask if he needed help? He asked for coffee, then said he forgot his wallet. Tori folded her arms. This isn't a shelter. Bryce, still lounging nearby, piped in helpfully. You should have seen it. Real touching. Old guy thought pity gets you free coffee. Maybe he's working on a sob story for social media. Leah didn't reply. She turned, walked behind the counter, opened her wallet, and pulled out a $5 bill. The register beeped as she keyed in a small black coffee. She walked it over herself. The room went quiet. Walter looked up as she approached, his eyes tired but sharp. Leah placed the coffee gently in front of him. Mr. Briggs, Walter Briggs. She nodded. Mr. Briggs, I'm sorry for the way you were treated. That shouldn't have happened. Walter studied her for a long second before he nodded. You're the first one to say that. Leah offered a small smile. It's long overdue. Tori called from behind the counter, voice laced with irritation. You didn't have to pay for him. Leah turned. Her tone was calm, but her voice carried. I didn't do it out of pity. I did it because I've watched men like him get humiliated too many times for simply existing in places that act like they don't belong. The air went still. Bryce laughed. So, what now? You playing social justice waitress? Leah looked him square in the eye. No, I'm remembering. She turned back to Walter. My grandfather was put in a separate waiting room at a hospital in '63. He died before a doctor ever saw him, not because of money, because of skin. She turned back to the room. I don't need a tip to do what's right. Kindness isn't a transaction. Silence. A few customers looked down. Others fidgeted with their phones. Walter finally spoke, his voice low but steady. Thank you, Ms. Leah. He nodded. You've got more backbone than most generals I met in the service. She chuckled lightly, then her tone softened. Can I get you anything else, Mr. Briggs? He shook his head. This is plenty. She left him then, walking back through the rows of tables, each step deliberate. Tori stared, arms crossed, while Jalen watched with a quiet awe he didn't know how to name. The tension didn't lift, but it shifted. The kind that stays when someone breaks an unspoken rule. To look, to speak, to care when everyone else had chosen comfort. Leah didn't need the room's approval. She only needed to remember the promise she'd made years ago. Don't ever let them silence your heart just to keep your job. Leah brought over a small saucer of sugar and cream without being asked. Walter didn't touch them. He liked his coffee as it came bitter and true. She sat across from him. Not to supervise, not to explain, just to listen. Outside, the rain had tapered into a soft mist, and inside the cafe, voices returned to low murmurs. Bryce and his table fell quiet but didn't leave. Their smirks lingered like smoke. Walter sipped his coffee slowly. His hand trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of memories clawing their way back. You know, he began, setting the cup down with a soft clink, this isn't the first time I've been told I didn't belong somewhere warm. Leah tilted her head, inviting him to continue. I was 17. Birmingham. Walked into a diner with $2 in my pocket. Sat at the counter, didn't even speak. Just waited. The cook came out, said if I didn't leave, they'd call the sheriff. And they did. His fingers traced the edge of the saucer. They dragged me out in front of everybody. My lip was bleeding. One woman not much older than your aunt outside and wrapped her scarf around my face. Said, don't let them steal your shape, baby. You still belong in the world. Leah's throat tightened. Lost track of her after that. Never even got her name. But I remember that scarf. Red and gold. Softest thing I ever felt. Walter looked up at her, eyes steady. Kindness like that, it doesn't fix the world. But it fixes the man in front of you. From across the room, Bryce coughed and called out, Hey Leah, you opening a therapy booth now? Leah ignored him. Walter didn't flinch. It's funny, Walter continued, how folks think racism is just slurs and signs. But it ain't. It's when a man like me walks in a place like this, and you all start calculating, wondering if I can pay, if I'll steal, if I belong. It's the seat by the trash. It's the eyes that look right through you. Leah nodded slowly. It's in the decisions made when no one thinks they're being watched. Walter smiled faintly. Exactly. There was a beat of silence, heavy and intimate. Can I ask you something, Ms. Leah? Of course. Why'd you do it? Pay for me, I mean, when it would have been easier not to. She hesitated, then answered honestly. Because I've walked into places and felt smaller than I am. Because I've watched men like you be treated like shadows in rooms they helped build. She looked toward the bookshelf, where the cafe's mission statement was engraved in brushed metal. Community, connection, coffee. Because I'm tired of places that preach community but practice exclusion. Walter's eyes twinkled. You a preacher? No, she laughed. Just someone who remembers. Across the cafe, a few heads were now tilted their way not to mock, but to listen. Bryce's laughter had died. Even Tori, now wiping down tables near the counter, looked over with something like discomfort in her posture. Walter finished his coffee. It's strange, he said. I've marched, fought, buried friends. But sometimes the smallest thing, a seat by a window, a warm drink, feels like the biggest victory. Leah nodded. Because it reminds us we're still human. He tapped the side of his mug. And being human, Ms. Leah, ought to be free of charge. She smiled. That simple, defiant smile, the kind that doesn't ask permission. In that moment, amid a cafe full of silent watchers, a truth hung quietly in the air. Dignity is not optional. It's owed. The next morning, the cafe smelled of burnt espresso and lemon sanitizer. Rain still hovered in the sky, casting a dull gray hue across the brick walls. Leah arrived 15 minutes early, as always. She stepped behind the counter, tying her apron as the air buzzed with the low hiss of the first steamed milk of the day. Leah, office. Now. The voice belonged to Mr. Hill, the regional operations manager. Tall, pressed, pale, and perpetually impatient, he stood by the office door with a clipboard tucked under his arm like a warning label. Leah followed without a word. Inside the cramped back room, the lights flickered overhead, casting the space in an unsettling buzz. A filing cabinet rattled with the air conditioning. Mr. Hill shut the door behind her and remained standing. He didn't offer her a seat. We need to talk about yesterday, he began, his voice clipped and cold. Leah crossed her arms, calm and steady. All right. Hill clicked his pen. I've received a complaint. She raised an eyebrow. From whom? Tori. And some customers. They felt uncomfortable by your impromptu sermon. One said it was confrontational. Leah blinked. I stood up for a man being mistreated because of his appearance. I paid for his coffee, that's all. Mr. Hill's jaw tightened. This is a business, not a platform. We serve customers, not causes. She leaned slightly forward. And which policy says we're allowed to humiliate elderly black veterans in front of a crowd? That's not what happened, he snapped. No, she replied, because I watched it happen, and so did a dozen others. He waved a dismissive hand. Look, Leah, don't make this about race. That's not the issue here. She inhaled slowly. It's always about race when a black man walks into a white-owned cafe and gets sent to sit by the trash while people laugh. Hill's mouth tightened. You're escalating this. I'm stating facts. He placed the clipboard on the desk. Do you want to keep this job? The threat was not even veiled. Leah nodded. I do, but I won't pretend I didn't see what I saw. I won't apologize for treating someone with dignity. Hill pointed at her, eyes narrowing. You embarrassed your coworker. You created division. And now you're painting this place like some racist operation. She stayed silent. Do you understand how serious that is for a brand like ours? I understand that brand values mean nothing if they crumble the moment they're tested. Hill's cheeks flushed. You're here to serve, not to lecture. A long pause. Then Leah asked softly, Are you done? He exhaled sharply. Yes, you're on thin ice. She nodded, turned, and walked out. Back in the kitchen, Jalen was rinsing pitchers at the sink. He straightened when he saw her. His face was unreadable. Tori, by the pastry case, stood stiff, her lips pressed in a faint smile. As Leah passed, Libby, one of the tech customers from the day before, happened to be picking up a to-go order. She muttered under her breath, just loud enough, St. Leah, protector of freeloaders. Jalen heard it. His jaw clenched. He said nothing. But when Leah caught his eye, something passed between them. A flicker of guilt, a flicker of resolve, something beginning. She didn't respond to Libby, didn't flinch. She grabbed her apron, signed in for the shift, and stepped back onto the floor. Not because she was unaffected, but because she refused to make herself small for people who saw her courage as disruption. And in her silence, there was thunder. The storm passed, but the tension lingered. In the days that followed, Leah kept her head down. She still arrived early, still swept the floors, still trained the baristas who rolled their eyes when her back was turned. No one spoke of Walter. No one asked about the coffee. But the silence had changed. It was heavier. Jalen felt it more than most. He hadn't said a word during the incident, hadn't defended Walter, hadn't backed Leah. He'd stood there like a fixture, part of the furniture, neutral to injustice. But neutrality, he now realized, wasn't neutral at all. It was complicity. 3 days after Walter had left the cafe, Jalen made a decision. He printed out the address from a receipt still pinned to the corkboard in the back. Walter had left it behind, hoping for a call about a lost umbrella. No one had called, no one had cared. Until now. He took the bus to the address, a red brick apartment building tucked between a liquor store and a shuttered laundromat. He climbed the stairs to the third floor and knocked. The door opened slowly. Walter stood there in a brown cardigan and house slippers. His expression was unreadable at first, then softened when he recognized Jalen. "You're the quiet one," Walter said, stepping aside. "Didn't think you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would," Jalen admitted. The apartment was small but clean. A single bookshelf overflowed with Baldwin, Ellison, and Morrison. Framed photos lined the mantel. A black soldier in uniform, a woman in librarian glasses holding a protest sign, a little girl with missing teeth grinning from a swing set. Walter motioned to a chair. Jalen sat. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Jalen began, "for not stepping in, for not saying anything." Walter looked at him. "And now? I want to listen." Walter poured him a glass of lukewarm lemonade, then sit a while. They talked for over an hour. Walter told him about the Freedom Riders, about serving in Korea, about coming home to find his GI Bill denied at every turn, about his wife, Laverne, who had once chained herself to the public library's front doors when they tried to shut it down for renovations. Jalen listened. Really listened. "Laverne used to say," Walter murmured, "you're not free until your silence costs you something. She was louder than I ever was. She paid for it." Jalen looked down. "I think I'm finally starting to get it." Walter nodded. "It's a start." When Jalen left, he didn't go home. He went to a quiet spot in the park, opened his phone, and began to write. Not a rant, not an accusation, just the truth. He told the story from the beginning: the rain, the seat by the trash, the laughter, the silence, Leah's defiance, and Walter's dignity. He ended the post with a simple line: "Dignity should never depend on who's watching." He posted it with no tags, no hashtags, just the truth. By morning, it had over 0 shares. By the end of the week, a local news outlet picked it up, then a national one. Heritage Cafe's inbox was flooded. Some called for firings, others for praise. Some wanted to boycott, others wanted to donate. But underneath it all, something unexpected began to shift. For the first time, the world had stopped to remember a man it would have otherwise forgotten. Not because of fame, not because of power, but because someone finally chose to see him and tell the story right. And stories, when told truthfully, have a way of turning silence into change. It was a bright, dry Thursday when Elias Vaughn stepped into the Heritage Cafe. He wore an old bomber jacket and charcoal slacks, sharp, but not loud. His graying beard was neatly trimmed, his gait steady. No entourage, no flash. Just a man entering a space with quiet purpose. Jalen noticed him first. There was something familiar in the man's walk, the calm confidence, the deliberate scan of the room. But what caught Jalen's attention most was where the man chose to sit, table 3. The same one Walter Briggs had been exiled from days earlier. Near the trash bins, the forgotten seat. Elias didn't flinch as he sat. Tori, back from her brief suspension with no sign of contrition, approached with a raised brow. "Do you need a menu?" she asked, already irritated. "No, thank you. Just black coffee," Elias replied, voice low and calm. Tori huffed, took his order, and walked away. She didn't ask if he wanted sugar, didn't offer water. Jalen turned to Leah, who had just stepped onto the floor. "There's something different about that guy," Jalen murmured. Leah followed his gaze. Her eyes narrowed. "Bring him the coffee," she said softly, "and stay close." Jalen nodded, made the drink himself, and brought it over carefully. "Here you go, sir." Elias looked up and smiled. "Thank you, young man." Something in his tone made Jalen pause. "Sir, do I know you?" Elias just nodded toward the rest of the cafe. "Not yet, but they will." A moment later, the bell above the door rang again. 2 sharply dressed individuals, one black woman in a tailored suit, and one tall white man with a briefcase entered, nodded to Elias, and approached Leah. "Miss Morin?" "Yes?" I'm Dana Powell, legal counsel for Eversight Enterprises. This is Grant Ellison, press liaison. Leah blinked. I'm sorry, Eversight? Behind her, Mr. Hill had just arrived, toting his laptop bag and a forced smile. Everything okay? He asked, trying to project calm. Dana turned. You must be Mr. Hill. Regional management, correct? Yes, that's right. What's this about? Jalen stepped closer. Tori hovered near the espresso machine, clearly eavesdropping. Dana gestured toward the back, where Elias now stood from table 3 and removed his jacket, revealing a crisp vest beneath. May I introduce Mr. Elias Vaughn, Dana said, founder and CEO of Eversight Enterprises. The cafe froze. Hill's mouth parted slightly. Tori's face drained of color. Elias stepped forward. I own this cafe, he said simply. In fact, I own this entire chain. The silence was immediate, heavy, and full of exposed truth. Elias looked around slowly. I came here last week, not as myself, but as someone who once looked a lot like Walter Briggs. I wanted to see if the values printed on your walls matched the treatment of your customers. He turned to Leah. One person passed that test. Leah's face flushed not with pride, but shock. Ms. Morin, I read the post your colleague wrote. I read it twice. Then I pulled the surveillance footage. He turned to Hill. You watched a man be humiliated and did nothing. Hill stammered. Tu wasn't even there when it happened. No, Elias said firmly. But you knew, and you defended the ones who caused it. Dana stepped in. Effective immediately, Tori is released. Mr. Hill, you are relieved of your duties. You'll receive notice from HR within 48 hours. Tori's voice cracked. You're firing me because of one old man? Elias turned to her, eyes firm. Because every old man likes him. Because every time someone like you made someone like him feel small and got away with it. He turned back to Leah. And you, he said gently, are being promoted. Regional Director of Equity and Inclusion, if you'll accept it. Leah, stunned, could only nod. As the room stood stunned, Elias walked back to table 3, set down his coffee, and smiled at Jalen. You chose to tell the story. That changed everything. And for once, everyone listened. 3 weeks later, Heritage Café didn't look the same. The air still smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon, but something deeper had shifted, like the building itself had taken a long breath and exhaled shame. The worn table by the trash was gone. In its place stood a new polished table with a small brass plaque that read, Briggs Corner, where dignity sits first. On a sunny Thursday morning, Mr. Walter Briggs returned. He wore a gray tweed cap, neatly pressed slacks, and the same navy cardigan, now mended at the shoulder. Leah met him at the door with a warm smile. Mr. Briggs, she said, your usual table is ready. Walter chuckled. Didn't think I'd live long enough to see my name on furniture. Leah led him to the window, to the table that once held ridicule but now held reverence. The seat had been reupholstered with soft green fabric. The view overlooked the busy sidewalk where people rushed, unaware that a quiet revolution had taken place here. Inside, things were different now. The wall near the counter had been repainted. Gone were the generic slogans. In their place was a mural Walter's likeness, captured in soft, strong lines. Behind him, marching figures. Above, in bold script, no one should have to earn kindness. The new house policy, printed on every menu, was clear. Your first cup is on use if you need warmth, not explanation. Every barista had undergone bias training. Leah led those sessions herself, sharing not statistics, but stories. Real ones. Ones that stuck in your gut. Jalen was now assistant manager. He wore the title lightly, but the lessons heavily. And as for Tori and Hill, their absence left no gap, only clarity. On that Thursday, a young white man in a button-down shirt entered, his coat soaked from the rain. He looked unsure, eyes darting between the full tables. Jalen stepped forward, voice warm. Would you like to sit by the window? The man nodded, relieved. Walter watched quietly from his seat. Then Leah approached with a steaming mug. Your coffee, sir. First pour of the day. Walter took it with both hands. Still black. He grinned. Just how you like it, Leah replied. He sipped, then let the silence sit a while. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned. You know, Walter said, when I sat here the first time, I didn't want anyone to see me. And now? He looked out the window. Now I want them to remember me. At 3 p.m., the cafe filled again for a new tradition, open reflection hour. No microphones, no performances, just people telling stories over coffee. Today, Leah stood up with a notebook in her hand. I want to tell you about the cup that changed this cafe, she began. It cost $5, but it was never about the money. It was about what we do when no one expects us to care. The crowd listened in quiet reverence. Some nodded, some blinked back tears. I thought I was helping a man who had nothing, Leah continued, but it turns out he had everything we'd forgotten: patience, pride, and history. She closed her notebook. Sometimes the richest people aren't in boardrooms. Sometimes they're in the seat by the trash waiting for someone to remember who they are. Applause rose, not out of politeness, but recognition. Later that evening, as the cafe lights dimmed and chairs were stacked, Walter stood outside beneath the fading light. Leah joined him. You ever think one coffee would do all this? She asked. Walter shook his head. I never drank it to change the world. I drank it to stay dry. He paused, smiling gently. But I'm glad someone saw what the world tried to forget. They stood there a moment longer, side by side, as the mural glowed in the window behind them. And somewhere deep in the city, a stranger sipped a free coffee and whispered, I'm seen. The kindness had rippled. And the cafe, once just a place to order drinks, had become something else entirely. A place where dignity had a seat, always.